Welcome to Getting Our Reward Heads Together, the podcast for reward and HR leaders brought to you by Reward Heads. Each episode, we explore the ideas, challenges, and innovations shaping how organisations design, deliver, and talk about reward. We're a boutique consultancy creating bespoke solutions for our clients, but we'll tell you more about that after the episode. For now, let's get started.
I'm Victoria Milford, the CEO of Reward Heads. UK contact centres employ over 1 million people and are an important part of our economy, but they are ever evolving, even more so now with AI and other tech. And so we've invited Steve Morrell of contact centre specialist Contact Babel to share his more than 25 years of experience. I'm just making you sound old there, Steve, in the sector, and help us to understand what the picture looks like for people and reward in contact centres. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Well, really appreciate being on, Victoria.
So let's start talking about, what are the big issues that you see in contact centres today, and what do you see changing over the next few years?
I don't think I'm going to surprise anybody if I say that AI is the single most important, and probably second, third, and fourth most important thing connected with contact centres and customer service in general today.
So do you think so here's my sort of man in the street kind of view of AI based on what you see on the news. It's going to take all of our jobs. Is that what you think is going to happen? Will we see fewer jobs, or will we see AI replacing offshore contact centres, with UK moving more to be sort of what they call second line, don't they, and the more complex stuff? Is that what you think AI is going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll address the first question. Is it going to take all of our jobs? No, it isn't. I'm old enough, as you so kindly pointed out, to remember the first wave of scariness from offshore contact centres. In fact, we were employed then by the DTI, as it was, to assess just how big of a threat this was. And strangely enough, your contact centres are here now 3 times more as there were back in the day when we started doing that piece of research. So, no. It's not going to take all of our jobs. It will, however, change them. It's really, the nature of the work will definitely change. We have seen it change. It will change even more.
So, in what way do you see it changing then?
I think the data that we have, because we base all of our stuff on surveys. When we look at customer preference, it's very much. If there's an urgent, emotional, or complex issue, people are much more likely now to reach for the phone than they even were a few years ago.
Oh, that's really interesting. Actually, I would say that I do that myself. That I don't know about anybody else, but the chatbots drive me absolutely up the wall. So if you're asking something super simple like what time does such and such open, you can kind of find that stuff on Google yourself, can't you? The reason that you go onto the specialist areas or the live chat or something like that is because you've got a complicated thing to ask, and invariably you need to talk to a human being, don't you? The chatbots can't answer those kinds of questions.
Absolutely. In fact, chatbot is kind of a bit of a misnomer, because when you look at what they're actually doing, they're just a front end put in front of frequently asked questions. They're not actually intelligent. They're not AI in any real sense of it. That will change, and it is changing. It's very difficult just to look at a chatbot to say whether or not it's got any real intelligence behind it, or whether it is just literally parroting stuff that it might be on various documents beforehand. And as you've pointed out, yes, most of them are really very simple. You can only do so much. That is changing though. But yes, I agree that people, they don't necessarily want to talk to people. They're not doing it because they're lonely. They're doing it because they want to get the answer with the least amount of effort to them. So
is there a bit also about, you think you can persuade a human and you can't persuade a machine? So if you're asking for some help or compensation or goodwill or to go outside of the process, a machine can't go outside of the process.
Computer says no. Yeah. That's
or am I just telling you more than I should be telling you about why I call contact centres, possibly? Yes. I don't know.
Very possibly. Obviously that's a hugely valid point. So the AI that we see, a lot of people think, oh, it's chatbots. It's not just chatbots. That's actually, very thin end of the wedge. We're going to be seeing is a lot more in terms of AI working alongside the agents, helping them, augmenting them, providing, the right information, listening to what people are saying and suggesting responses. filling in various forms for them when they're, the AI listens to the conversation, it fills in the various things. So the agent, you don't hear a tappity tap in the background, or, oh, hang on, let me just look at a different system, because the AI is putting it all there for them. So that in theory should make calls quicker and more effective. However, in practice, I always like to be contrarian. It may well be that agents aren't getting as much downtime between calls. It may be that they're being rushed through the calls, or so I think overall you can make a strong argument for these calls, generally speaking, becoming more stressful, because you're going to be doing a lot of complex emotional work with customers who are stressed, and your system that you're using isn't giving you a second to any sort of downtime.
That's actually quite frightening then for us to think about as sort of HR and reward people, that you've got agents on the phone, and people can't necessarily hear what the conversation is about always. I know people can listen in, but they're not listening into every single call, and that they could become much more tense and difficult emotionally than they are today.
Yeah, very much so. It's worth bringing, just kind of as an aside, you have this AI technology called sentiment analysis, and that listens to, you can use it in various ways. One of the ways you can use it is on a listening to every single call and marking stress indicators within, whether it's kind of voice biometrics or with types of words and things like that. There is the EU AI Act. I know we are no longer under the EU's auspices, but we do align pretty closely with them in a lot of things, and this may well happen in the future. The EU AI Act does not allow you to use voice biometrics to basically treat customers in a different way from each other. So you kind of have one hand tied behind your back there. If somebody is indicating stress through their voice, you are not able to use that technology if you're under this act to actually then act in a different way, which might actually be better for the customer.
Yeah, and indeed for the agent, so that you could intervene earlier. And that sounds like very much like we're going to end up having to deal with negative consequences at the end rather than prevent them. And we know from what we're seeing in mental health data and sickness data that already this is a building problem, isn't it, across the piece? And I don't just mean in contact centres.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting. I did a white paper recently on how to identify agent attrition very early and hopefully do something about it, because a lot of the time people know somebody's leaving when they're actually walking out the door with a cardboard box. So anyway, within part of that, we looked at absence rates in contact centres compared to the UK industry as a whole. And in fact, I can't remember the number off the top of my head. It was either 2 or 3 times higher in contact centres than it was, for the nation in general. Look, on the bright side, we're not in America. I think there is something ridiculous, like 4 or 5 times higher than the standard industry. And this is they're not always being paid sickness pay there either. So they must, if you're taking a day off for reasons of, say, you're stressed or burnt out or something like that, then they kind of really mean it, because they're not being paid for it in most cases.
But that's really interesting thing to think about, because of course with the employment rights bill, everybody will be entitled to sick pay from day one in the way they haven't been in every organisation, unless the company decides to pay that. And so I think what you're saying is that we could see some really big spikes in costs coming in contact centres driven by some of those conversations, and they may not have been paid today, but they will need to be paid going forward. So something absolutely that organisations need to think about. And gosh, I think they always need to be thinking about the prevention, not the cure, don't they? Absolutely. And maybe this just gives even more fuel to the fire, and hopefully some insights to take up to the board who don't always see what it's like on the front line.
No, absolutely. I think having done this for an awfully long time, I get the impression that agent attrition and absence is kind of baked into the business model. It's kind of just one of those things. And back in the day when a lot of the work was, repetitive, a bit could be a bit mind-numbing, I'll be honest with you. Not every organization, but you could get a lot of the things that are now handled perfectly effectively with self-service, and customers are very willing to do that, reserving their, the picking up the phone when they actually need to talk to somebody. So that's a positive thing. It makes, from the agent's perspective, it makes their job more interesting. But from a negative perspective, as I've said, if they're getting a high proportion of calls which are difficult, then that is, that's potentially an issue that we need to certainly consider and look at. And I want to throw in something else here that maybe has gone under the radar about the kind of effect of remote working.
That's really interesting. I was just thinking about, back in the day, everyone sat in those huge buildings, desk to desk. But the tech that we've got now, coupled with what we saw in COVID and lots of people working from home, means people can work remotely in these roles. Good thing?
Back in the day, remote working was seen as a kind of a reward. So if you've got an experienced agent who's doing a really good job, you give them a day or two at home a week, or maybe even go fully remote if that's what they wanted to do. So it was actually seen as a very positive thing. Yeah, as you pointed out, pandemic, everything changed. Stuff was done in 2 weeks that couldn't have been done theoretically in 2 years before. And as the dust settled from that, we've kind of seen a situation now whereby the majority of agents are hybrid. So remote part-time, based at a centralized contact center part-time, which is good from the perspective of, it's a positive thing. You don't have to do the commute, which is obviously a nightmare for anybody, but it's not all positive.
No, I think it does mean that you can get a more of a diverse workforce, because you can get people who aren't spending their time going to a central location, and that can fit around caring responsibilities and so on. But I think we know in other environments, particularly for people starting their careers, for younger workers, they need that social element, don't they? They need, we all need a bit of human contact, even people like you and I, who've been around a while and we're really used to this kind of stuff. I think you need to be able to talk to a human being, and just to have somebody looking at you thinking, you're struggling, aren't you? Do you want to go and get a coffee? There's no one to do that when you're at home, is there?
Absolutely. This is, again, something that's really difficult to measure, but we looked at this for our new white papers. You've got, in simple things, the kind of moments of micro stress, if you like. So you come off a difficult call. If you're in a centralized environment or an office, you look at your colleague, neighbor, or whatever, and just kind of roll your eyes and hey, yeah, and then back on with it. So you're letting off a bit of steam. That doesn't happen in a remote working environment. You've also got things like you tend to take fewer breaks. So you don't have the social permission. You see, your mate next to you go up to the water cooler, what have you. You don't have that. There's an always on feeling when you're working at home. And obviously you have connections with the contact center, because the contact center is very heavily managed. But that can, those tools that are there to help you, and the quality and things like that, they can appear to be kind of digital over management, like Big Brother type of thing, if they're not managed properly. So what can be a relative positive in a centralized environment can turn into a negative in a remote environment. That's something that hasn't really been looked at very much.
So I wonder if it's somewhat about recruiting a different kind of person in the beginning and really focusing in on what skills they've got and their resilience and so on, or is it that we need to change the way that we manage and support people? Or both. It's probably
a mixture of both. I think you knew I was going to say that, didn't you? When we look at, we give our contact center survey respondents a big long list of things that they'd like to see in their agents. So it is things like ability to self-manage, handle repetitive tasks, cross-sell and upsell effectively. The one that comes out by an absolute country mile is always empathy. And that, when I've talked about the nature of the work that the contact center agent of the future is going to be handling, empathy is only going to get more important. Now, okay, is it the $1 million question? How do you measure that? Can you teach it? And if you've got these people, how do you keep them? So, yeah.
And actually, that probably does play into things like recognition and appreciation. So there's always a sort of layman's assumption that reward is about money in my hot little hand or winning something. But it isn't necessarily. There's lots of research that says just being appreciated, someone saying thank you. I do it actually as a customer. I overplay it, I think. Whoever I'm speaking to on the phone, I will always thank them for their time and their help, even if it hasn't been a lot, because I don't think a lot of people do it. And just being appreciated can be incredibly valuable. And that's a fundamental part of a reward package. So how can you find a way to make sure you know what people are doing so you can appreciate them for it and just, recognize in the quite literal sense?
Absolutely. So, going back to our old mate AI, for many contact centers, still the quality control might just be done on 1 or 2% of calls. It doesn't really give a particularly good view of it. If you have AI listening to every conversation and kind of, if you like, marking it out of 10 for various things, yes, you are then, you've got a much better idea about how that agent is managing their job. Are they happy? Are they stressed? Are they providing the right sort of level of service to the customer, which is all well and good. If you're using that in the wrong way, it can, as you can imagine, be seen like, oh, I literally can't do a foot out of line until they come in, and then they come down on me like a ton of bricks. So it's not about the technology, it's about how you're using it.
I think one of the things that's kind of jumping out for me is about how much the senior team, and I mean right up to board level, truly understand about what's happening on the coalface. What are those calls like? What are the pressures that those teams are facing? How to get the right people, the right skills, how to reward them, and how to support them. And I think, we see this a lot. It's very much been a trend of the last couple of years in benefits, that the old everybody gets the same, or everyone gets the same, that's purely determined by seniority, just isn't appropriate anymore. There's a big mismatch between what employers are providing and what employees want and need and use. And you've got a group here that probably have slightly different needs to other populations, even if it's, say, a retail or hospitality organization will have employees paid not wildly dissimilarly to contact centres, but the pressures are different in some ways. So it's really understanding, what is it that your people are going through? What is it that, let's be business selfish about it. What can you do to make them more efficient and effective and motivated? It's not just doing this because it's the right thing to do.
Also get them to stay longer if they're the right people. That's a key thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We've found when we're doing our customer experience research, we say, like, right, okay, what is it really important that, what's good customer experience look like? Well, it's about answering the phone quickly, and it's about answering the question first time. Those are the things that customers really value. Okay, lovely. Then we say, right, so how many of your agents are actually rewarded based on these things? In particular, so give them a big long list of things that are really important: your customer satisfaction, NPS, first contact resolution, these sorts of things. And it's only a pretty small minority that, an agent can be sitting there doing a good job or a bad job, and they tend to get paid, unless they're doing sales, obviously, and that's the whole new kettle of fish. They tend to get paid pretty much the same. So I don't think there's not massive bonuses involved for everybody if they're doing a really good job, if their customers come away delighted, if their NPS is through the roof. I think there's an opportunity there. It doesn't mean it doesn't have to be an enormous thing, but to reward your good performers more than your lower performers kind of makes sense to me.
It does, but I think it's probably driven by two things. One is cost control. We've seen things like the national living wage going up year on year quite steeply. And that has also compressed the difference between maybe, back in the day, there might be a new agent and an established agent. And actually the difference between the two has got smaller and smaller because businesses just can't afford it. So I think there's a bit of cost control. Short-sighted, you might argue, but understandable. And I think there's also a bit of risk management, because what we've seen, not so much in contact centres, but certainly we've seen across retailers, and we've seen it in the public sector as well, is equal pay claims, quite large equal pay claims, where the tendency therefore is to go to one rate, to a spot rate for everybody in the same environment, and making no distinctions whatsoever, because you have to justify them and explain them. And the EU Pay Transparency Directive doesn't apply to the UK, but I think we can see some of the principles coming in. And I think the challenges are going to be, well, why does Steve earn 5%, 10%, 20% more than I do for the same job? And what did he do to get that? And I think organisations probably aren't as equipped as they should be about really measuring and objectively assessing, are you doing a better job than me? Because if you are, brilliant, let's reward you. And maybe this environment, there's better data.
I mean, there is better data, but also I kind of argue against myself there as well. We've seen this again and again in contact centres. I dare say you've seen it in wider business, but I know about contact centres. Once you start measuring and rewarding based on, a factor or two factors or something like that, then people game the system.
Sure.
You've seen this at a business wide level. It's like, give us a 5-star review, or because we won't get paid anything otherwise.
And it's like, we always test out bonus schemes and commission schemes. So we always go to the high performers and ask them to break it, ask them to stress test it, ask them to, how would you go around this? Because they will be the ones who know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a fair point. I think you're going to have a lot more information on whether or not somebody's doing a good job. So you get automated NPS now, but AI is doing. You don't have to go and ask people. Give us a mark out of 5 or whatever it is. You can get the NPS to do. You can get the AI to do that for you fairly accurately. It's then what you do with the information is the key thing, I suppose.
I suspect we could talk about this all day, but and people may want to listen to us all day, but mindful that it's a short podcast. What would you say to people who are in the people space, I suppose, within contact centres? So those who are, HR directors or senior reward people, what should they really be worrying about?
I don't give people worries, but I would say be aware that the contact centre job now is different than it was 10 years ago, and the contact centre job in 10 years' time, number one, will still exist. Yes, AI is going to take some of the even more of the easier work, but I don't think we're going to see enormous kind of job losses overnight with that. I think it's going to be a case of attrition not being replaced. So if you like, a steady decline in headcount, but voice channel is still king. So that's not going to go away. You're just going to need better people to do this with different skills. And, once you've got the right people, you need to kind of keep them. I do think that offshore will have some sort of impact, particularly as I mentioned to you earlier, we have AI now that can smooth accents. That make it mutually comprehensive, so somebody in Bangalore can understand somebody in Glasgow very easily, and indeed vice versa, because in fact it's usually the other way around. It's the offshore agent that struggles to understand us. So those are things to bear in mind. So I think offshore is seeing a big boost at the moment.
Interesting. That's really interesting, because that's often one of people's biggest complaints, isn't it? That I can't understand the agent, or they can't understand what I'm on about. That's really interesting.
You start to take away that sort of issue. I've seen it working in real life. It's actually impressive and also scary. So things are changing a lot. It's not the case that the contact centre is as it always has been. The work is changing. The nature of the stresses are changing. The skills are changing, but empathy will always remain number one. It is just about keep a watching brief on your contact centre, because you come back in a year's time, it's going to be different than it is today.
Absolutely. And therefore how we recruit and retain and motivate and reward people is going to be different. That's really interesting. Thanks, Steve. So people can reach out to you if they want to know more for their contact centres at contactlabel.com, or of course anyone feel free to reach out to me at rewardheads.co.uk. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Getting Our Reward Heads Together, brought to you by Reward Heads. We're a boutique reward consultancy working with organisations across the UK and beyond. Our mission is to help HR and reward leaders design fair, engaging and effective reward frameworks and solutions, from pay and benefits to recognition and governance. Every solution we create is bespoke, built around each client's unique goals and challenges. We also offer coaching, resourcing, and trusted forums to keep you connected to the latest reward trends. If we can support your reward journey, we'd love to hear from you.